Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. I echo the comments made about the commitments many people are showing to keep normal life going through the tough weather. But I have heard, and I wonder if the First Minister has, of public sector employees being told they could face disciplinary procedures if they are unable to get to work. Does the First Minister agree that for any employer, public or private, to be threatening disciplinary procedures against employees, either whose childcare falls through or where transport is unavailable or unsafe, is a completely inappropriate response in the current situation?
First Minister.
Well, I mean, if Patrick Harvey furnishes us with detailed examples, then obviously we will take whatever action is required. Most of the information which is coming to us reflects exactly the opposite issue. It shows that public sector workers, particularly those in the health service, for example, are making exceptional efforts to get into work. Indeed, many health service workers, particularly in Tayside, have been staying in the hospitals over the last few days. If you take one of the assistant directors of Stirling, walked 6 miles in heavy snow today to award a Falkirk Community Hospital. One of the A&E consultants at Stirling Royal Infirmary gave up her whole house to let nurses from the hospital stay there, and she went to stay herself with a colleague. Across the public services, people are making exceptional efforts. Now, if Patrick Harvey has a detailed circumstance of people being unfairly treated, then the government will take the appropriate action. But I don't think it should deflect us from the recognition of the snow sub-zero heroes and the heroism which is going on around Scotland.
Question for Ian McKee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Could I ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government has further plans for tackling sectarianism?
First Minister.
The Scottish Government is committed to tackling sectarianism and all forms of religious intolerance wherever and whenever they arise. Sectarianism is never acceptable. In Scotland this year, we have seen some examples of good progress. The country united in welcoming His Holiness the Pope to Scotland, and then, of course, there was the All-Faith commemoration of the 450th anniversary of the Reformation. These two events, the reception of the overwhelming vast majority of the people of Scotland to them, indicated that perhaps Scotland is beginning to win the battle against sectarianism, and people of goodwill are uniting to win that battle.
Ian McKee.
I thank the First Minister for his reply, which is particularly appropriate in Scottish Interfaith Week. But does he not agree with me that the key to eradicating religious sectarianism is to influence the young? And in this respect, does he also agree with me that whilst having Scotland's children share a common educational experience seems not to be possible, all efforts should be made to encourage both faith and non-denominational schools to engage in a wide range of joint activities, allowing children of all faiths and none to work and play together, thus forming friendships across the religious divide based on familiarity and mutual respect?
Minister.
I do agree with that, and that, of course, is happening across many of our schools, as indeed are anti-sectarian programmes on the ground. This week, for example, Fergus Ewing attended the launch of Nil by Mouths addressing sectarianism in the workplace in Scotland. A range of other initiatives are being supported by the government, not just in education, but across a range of society. I think these efforts are laudable. I think I agree with Ian McKee in the support he gives to them, and they most certainly will continue despite the financial pressures facing this administration.
Ted Brocklebank.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the First Minister agree with me that it does little to douse the flames of sectarianism in football when chairmen of prominent Scottish clubs go on television to demand the sacking of individual referees?
First Minister.
I will sidestep around the requirement to interfere in the internal affairs of a Scottish Football Association, except to say this, that I think that the Scottish Football Association, like every responsible organisation in Scotland, has rules and regulations covering these matters. And I believe, incidentally, that following due process, they have come to the right decision.
Question 5, Bill Butler.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when the Scottish Government will meet the SNP's manifesto pledge to ensure 2 hours of PE in schools.
First Minister.
Of course, I know that Bill Butler would be the very first to acknowledge that the number of schools delivering 2 hours of physical education in primary has gone up from 5% under Labour to 55% now. And what's more, Her Majesty's Inspectors of Education report around 60% of secondaries are delivering 2 periods of physical education, generally of 50 or 55 minutes each. That's a significant improvement, but we want to do even better. And that's why we've embedded the physical education pledge within the new curriculum itself, and of course made the new delivery of the curriculum part of the budget deal, except Labour, we have struck with COSLA.
Bill Butler.
Thank the First Minister for his reply. The First Minister may recall that the SNP's 2007 manifesto stated, quote, "We will ensure that every pupil has 2 hours of quality PE each week, delivered by specialist PE teachers," unquote. In reality, all the SNP has ensured over the last 3.5 years is that fewer children have 2 hours of PE than when it took office. In 2006-07, it was 43%, which declined to 37% in 2009-10. This decline applies across the school system, with an especially deplorable fall in special school provision from 14 to 10% last year. Given that in his own backyard, Aberdeenshire stands 25th out of 32 local authorities at primary level and is bottom of the league in respect of secondary provision, will the First Minister do the decent thing and apologise to parents and children across Scotland for yet another broken SNP promise?
First Minister, I think I'll remind Bill Butler of the real figures and just a little bit of history.
Real figures.
I wasn't in this Parliament. Bill Butler was when Labour, Peter Peacock, then Minister of Education, made the pledge in 2004. Labour Party then surveyed the schools in 2005, which resulted in the figure and the finding of 5% of primaries allocating 2 hours of PE. Now, even by Bill Butler's arithmetic, he surely comes to the conclusion that 55% now is 50% greater than 5% under the Labour Party. I've also forgot to mention a rather important point. In response to the 5% finding, the Labour Party's dramatic action was to cease having any surveys. And just one more little bit of counting. In Labour's last year, 2006, there were 1,963 physical education teachers in Scotland. Under the Scottish National Party, there are now 2,017, which is more than 1,963.
Christine Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Notwithstanding and certainly not understating the serious consequences arising from the prevailing wintry conditions raised earlier in the Chamber, does the First Minister share my delight at seeing Scotland's school children enjoying fresh air and vigorous exercise in the sun? Would he therefore agree with me that winter sports should be on the school curriculum and would undermine the resistance of some children to compulsory exercise?
First Minister.
I always agree with Christine Graham whenever I'm able to, which is surprisingly often. But I do think that she, like me, agrees that one of the key things that's happening just now is that the active school programme is continuing in Scotland, which is an extraordinary contrast with the attempt to abolish the school sports partnership in England. I think yet again, in that contrast, we see real commitment to deal with these difficult times and prioritise physical education in Scotland, where south of the border the Condemned Coalition seems to be in some considerable difficulty on this and indeed many other issues.
Margaret Smith.
Does the First Minister agree with me that as well as getting enough PE in schools, it is important that children are able to get this in their local communities? And does he also agree that it is important that decision makers such as Edinburgh Leisure, who are, for example, currently considering the future of Kirkliston Leisure Centre in my constituency, have regard to the medium and long-term health benefits of sport and resist the temptation to accept closures as a short-term fix? And will he support the work being undertaken across the community to try to secure this important sports facility for an ever-expanding village?
First Minister.
I do agree with some of the tenor of that question, but I know that the member would be the first to recognise that public services in Scotland, this government, local authorities, every public services are under extraordinary budget pressure at the present moment. As I recall, the source of that budget pressure, it comes from the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition in London, handing down severe public sector cuts to Scotland, which are a third greater than even the extraordinary cuts that were being suggested by Alistair Darling when he was in office. So I do agree with the tenor of her question, but let us recognise that every public authority is under severe budgetary pressure at the present moment.
Question 6, Robert Brown.
Presiding Officer, can I ask the First Minister whether the Scottish Government supports the creation of a single police force for Scotland?
Well, the Scottish Government is considering reform options to ensure we can protect frontline policing in the face of unprecedented financial challenges. We will continue to prioritise keeping police officers on the beat. The interim findings of this work will be considered at the Scottish Policing Board meeting on the 6th of December.
Robert Brown.
To the First Minister for his reply. I wonder if he is aware that, I am sure he is, that a report going to that working group talks in terms of the abolition of the current aid forces, providing the greatest platform to enable investment in frontline policing. Is he, however, aware that this view is vehemently opposed by a number of the interests in this field? Does he, for example, share the view that the case for a single police force is based on flimsy evidence and focuses too much on saving money rather than delivering better policing, the view, incidentally, of ACPOS, or indeed the view of COSLA that there is no robust evidence in favour of a single police force? Will he now state clearly the Government's policy will not be to go in favour of a single police force in Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, the interim report should, I don't know if correct, but amplify Robert Brown's remarks, identifies 4 options: a single police force, a regional model with 3 or 4 forces, the existing 8 forces with more collaboration, or a combined police, fire and ambulance service. That work delivers the analysis and evidence which will be the foundation for future decisions on police reform. Robert Brown is entitled, of course, to have set his face firmly against one aspect of potential change. But he should remember and he should reflect on why this thorough examination of the efficiency and delivery of public service is necessary. It is necessary in the face of extraordinary public spending pressure. Now, given that public spending pressure emanates from the Liberal Democrats not in the comfort of opposition, but from the responsibility of government, I do think just a little bit of modesty and a little bit of constructive engagement in these changes is going to be required from the Liberal Democrat Party.
Richard Baker.
A single national police force for Scotland, structured correctly, could actually improve on the current arrangements for local accountability for decisions on policing and better deliver sustainable community policing with police on the beat at a local level.
First Minister.
Well, I am being encouraged by the Liberal Democrats to agree with Richard Baker, but I couldn't do any such thing in terms of question time. What I would say is this, that as we deliver structural change which is necessary, then it is important, crucially important, that we take society and all social partners with us. And I think the process of engagement that the meeting in the next few days comprises, as indeed the Christie Commission will allow us to do, is a far better way of a considered move to reform than perhaps Richard Baker would allow. I am tempted, but of course I would not do it, to remind Richard Baker on the 27th of April 2010 he recorded in a press statement about increases in racist crime in 3 of our 7 police force areas in Scotland.